she came downstairs to my bedroom. I've lived in the basement from my little bedroom there. And she was like, "Are you okay, Colby? Are you upset?" Because it's a very actually somber song. It's a song about brotherhood and about place and friendship and all these things, right? So that's really where it began. And, Bruce was my refuge as a teenager, as a pubescent teenager.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me today is another friend from up north. I will tell you, I love all my guests, but there's always something fun about having someone from Canada. Colby Crossley is joining me today. Colby, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. This is an honor and a privilege.
Well, that you are too kind. You're too kind. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, so I am Canadian. Perhaps you could tell by the accent that will be coming up here. Mm-hmm. I'm 28 years old, and I've been a Bruce Springsteen fan for half my life, actually. Wow. This year. So that's it. And then, so I come from Canada. I live in Alberta.
Okay.
I'm a writer on my spare time and currently working on a multi-year project.
Okay.
I was born and brought up in the Canadian prairies that edge the mountains of British Columbia.
Oh, nice.
Yes. A lot of people refer to Alberta as Canada's Texas.
Oh, I had not known that. Okay.
Right. Okay, so I think mainly because of our oil and gas industry, where a lot of men work and women too, but people tend to view Alberta with a redneck stigma, I would say.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, but we're good people, friendly people. We have values and we stand on what we believe on. So it's a good time here.
Good. Well, I always like to start at the beginning. First off, thank you so much for being on the show, and I appreciate it. Talk to me. You mentioned growing up near the Alberta and kind of the Canadian plains.
Yeah.
Quick story. The first time I went to Canada, we had bought a company that had an office in Winnipeg, Canada, and so I was flying to Winnipeg. And you guys had just had the Winter Olympics down, toward the west, and this beautiful snows and all this thing. Right. And I land in Winnipeg, and it is the flattest place I've ever seen. I mean, it looks like a Dallas suburb, right? Like, sure. It's like, this is Canada, till I had to visit in the winter, and then I go, no, this is not Texas. Sure. So yeah, right. It's very different. You forget how big Canada is. I mean, Canada is big as the US as far as geographic, yes. Diversity. Right. So yeah, absolutely. Growing up, what kind of music did you and your family listen to?
Well, if I could just stop you right there and add a little joke to what.
Please, always.
There's a joke about Winnipeg and mainly Saskatchewan, which is the neighboring province of Alberta and Winnipeg. But there's a joke of if you lose your dog, you can still see it running 4 days later. But yeah, growing up.
That is a true statement. I love that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we have some cheeky humor, I guess. But no, growing up though, Jesse, my mom is so musical. She's grew up, in the 80s and the 70s and 90s and all that. And so, but she's hard rock all the way. She's metal, hard rock. So we had a lot of, let's say, Slayer, Pantera, Ozzy Osbourne, which is, one of her main go-tos, Kiss, stuff like that. And, for a kid like me, who's more shy and quiet, it was very overbearing, I would say,
Oh,
to be her
really?
son.
Mhm.
In the family van, we crank up, Raining Blood by Slayer on an afternoon. Like, Mom, please turn the music down.
That's
um,
that's that's hilarious. I've had a fair amount of people that have shared that their parents were fans of classic rock, right?
yeah,
Depending on the age and such. But I think you're one of the first who's mentioned your mom listening to Slayer and Ozzy Osbourne. That's you.
yes.
I think you get a ding first time medal, as a gift.
Awesome.
It's pretty
Awesome.
cool.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah. How about your father?
So he's not in the picture,
Okay.
sadly.
Sad to hear,
But
but yes.
we've had a couple, marriages that my mom had where we had a couple stepdads and stuff
Okay.
like that. Bit of a rocky childhood, I would say, but
Okay.
it was all good spirited, and music certainly prevailed in our living
Mhm.
rooms.
Yeah.
We'd be dancing as kids, and my mom would be cooking dinner and come out
Mm.
and dance with us and things like that, very positive and uplifting. So that's pretty well I could say about, which
Okay.
encapsulates that.
Did did you rebel against that music? You had said you were kind of you were you, as a shy, reserved kid that
Mhm.
um, that loud, in your face rock and roll kind of made you
Yes.
uncomfortable. So did you kind of did you go the extreme and really love easy listening, or
Mm.
or soft pop? What
Mhm.
when you started developing your own music taste, how did that evolve?
Well, Jesse, I certainly rebelled against it for sure. But I really didn't have any
Okay.
sort of fallback artist or band. It really truly wasn't until I got Bruce Springsteen in my life where I'm like, okay, this is someone I can take refuge in and truly um, sort of put myself into his music. Um,
Right. It's sometimes you I feel like I'm coming home, to quote, right?
mm,
Halfway to
yes.
heaven. And, so did I ask this to every guest, but I think it's especially relevant to your story. How did you find Bruce, and what about him spoke to you?
So this is probably going to be a really cool story.
Good.
So
I love
my
it.
right. So my story with Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band is kind of like a story of loneliness and solitude. And I say as I've never really been able to share this extreme fandom with another fan of, say, your caliber or anyone, I haven't really met anyone quite yet that understands Bruce like we do, for example. But he came into my life by one night. My mom came home. This was about 2007, late 2007 or early 2008. I can't quite
Okay.
remember the details or the date, but she came home with the album Magic. And she had gone home from a concert and it was a free CD she got or something like that, to that effect. She said, Colby, you might like this music. She knew who Bruce was too, but she wasn't really a fan. And we never had Bruce Springsteen play in the house or the car prior to me getting this CD. So I saw this older guy in the front cover, right? It's Bruce Springsteen. And I opened up the CD and there was the whole band. There's Niels, Clarence, Patty, Max, Gary, Steve, and Danny and Roy. So the whole band was there and I thought, gee, who are these guys? I was only 14, 15 years old, right? So I popped in the disc, bam, Radio Nowhere came on. Okay, this is pretty good, and then Living in the Future, and then got the, Your Own Worst Enemy, Gypsy Biker, Girls, and then all these songs. And then the last song, which isn't actually on the back of the album, it's Terry that came on. And Jesse, when I heard that song, that's when I'm like, okay, this kind of sort of encapsulates the entire record with this beautiful song, a tribute to a friend of Bruce's from his past, right? That passed on, I'm assuming at the time. Beautiful record. I gotta say, my mom would open the door and would hear Terry replay, on repeat, on and on and on. And, she came downstairs to my bedroom. I've lived in the basement from my little bedroom there. And she was like, "Are you okay, Colby? Are you upset?" Because it's a very actually somber song. It's a song about brotherhood and about place and friendship and all these things, right? So that's really where it began. And, Bruce was my refuge as a teenager, as a pubescent teenager.
Colby, I thank you for sharing that. That's a wonderful story, and I'm gonna kind of dig into it a little bit more. But
Yeah,
what I love the idea is that there is I can't remember who said it once, but there was and I'll think of his name the moment we quit recording, but their comic book insider, was a newsletter and a kind of actual magazine, and the editor said every comic book is someone's first comic book. And so therefore, when you're writing that, you have to understand that you have to play to two different audiences. You have to not bore your consistent readers, but you also have to make this inclusive enough, inviting enough that someone new can join on. And I said that about Bruce, that every Bruce show is someone's first Bruce show. So if you're an old veteran that, is in his 50, he or she is in their 50s or 60s, have seen hundreds of shows, you may never want to hear Racing in the Street or Badlands or Born to Run Again, but there's somebody who's never been at that show that is going to maybe have an accident in excitement that they're hearing Born to Run live for the first time. And the reason I kind of go on this rambling is I heard Darkness and it changed my life. Boy, got born in the USA, and then I had to go back to the back catalog. You and Rob Carmack, who does Bruce Springsteen Sings the Alphabet, Magic is how he found Bruce. And he is, and so I love the idea that there's someone, who may stumble on this podcast, that Letter to You or Western Stars might be their entry point. So I love that you shared that Magic was kind of yours. And what was it just that? And I don't want to belittle that, because I think all of us had these as a teenager. There is a reason why it's a cliche of feeling out of place and feeling like I don't fit in. And Don Henley once said that he had a theory that we spend most of our adult lives trying to get over high school. So was there something specific that you were struggling with, if you feel like sharing, or was it, about why this music kind of was your refuge?
Well, I would say it was mainly the emotional resonance that I felt and that I welcomed into my being when I had the record play front to back over and over and over. And keep in mind, this is 2007, 2008. So this isn't a vinyl. This is me as the next generation discovering Bruce Springsteen into his career at this point, mind you, right? But sort of in a way exercising that traditional approach to listening to music, when you put the CD or the vinyl rather, and then you read the liner notes and the lyrics and look at the pictures in the album artwork and the notes and all these things, right? And so I did that, and going back to the Slayer and the Pantera and the Ozzy and the Kiss and all these in the car in the house, this was like an intimate experience because he spoke softly in some songs. In other songs, he spoke as if he was lost and looking for others, or, all these things, right? Bruce Springsteen does such a fantastic job with with his magic trick, if I may say.
Yeah, exactly.
With embodying these characters, eh? So there wasn't anything truly I was going through. It's just as a teenager, it was high time that I find a kind of music that could begin the soundtrack to my life.
Yeah. I just had a guest on that the podcast hasn't been released yet, but he talked about that. And he tells a beautiful story about he did not come out till very, very late in his life. And he said that he has a theory that the reason why so many people in the lesbian, gay, non-gender community enjoy Bruce's music is because of that sense of isolation, the sense of being different, the sense of not fitting in. And I think that's, as you talk about that, I think that's a really important point that he does speak about that. The other thing I love is the idea that, well, let me ask you, okay, you've discovered magic, you love it.
Yeah.
Did you start going and looking for other albums? I mean, what was the next path in your Springsteen journey?
Right. So, well, I'll give you two things here to respond
Please.
to what your previous guest had mentioned about his journey and coming out. Because I'm also gay actually myself, but I didn't come out till I was 20 years old.
Okay.
So there's like a 6 or 5 year gap from this point on of discovering Bruce to when I came out. But really, I would say Springsteen does a fantastic job, whether you can't afford a show and you watch him on YouTube like I have, because I've never been to a show myself.
Yeah.
Not yet. But I've scoured the internet, YouTube and all these things. The Nugs net shows.
Yeah, sure.
I have a huge collection we can go over later on. But you get a sense of community in his music. And you can put your isolation into him and the band.
Yeah.
But going back to your next question here about where did I go from here? It was really just, okay, so I played the album Magic for days and weeks and whatever. Does this guy have anything else?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. Like, is this guy a one-hit wonder? Like,
right. Well, I just had no idea who he.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Was,
okay.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Completely. I did not know. I didn't know who Clarence was. I didn't know, like, Niels looked like the youngest guy in the band, but I didn't know who Niels was because, again, all I had was the album artwork. So if I can remember correctly, I went on YouTube, and it was also this time that I started discovering Johnny Cash. And the video and song in particular I came across at that time was Hurt, his cover of the Nine Inch Nails song. What a tremendous cover and video that was. I mean, I still go back to that years later. It's just a fantastic video and all that. But keying in Johnny Cash on YouTube and then keying in Bruce Springsteen on YouTube, these guys started kind of, gelling. The algorithms of the search engine started giving me more and more of these artists. And then it's when I discovered Born to Run. And I'm like, gee, I might have heard this on the radio at some point.
Yeah, sure.
And, Jesse, from there, after YouTube, I'm like, hey, Mom, can I get some more CDs? And so she would take me to like a Walmart, or in those days we had the music and like movie store called HMV.
Yeah.
I don't know if the States has that, but I know the UK does. Anyways, that's our music store to go to. Not anymore. It's now Sunrise Records, but that was HMV back in the day. And we go there and, we go to the Bruce Springsteen section of the store and flip through some CDs. And my next one, I believe, was The Rising. And then I believe I got the Greatest Hits album from 95.
Okay.
In like a convenience store. I just stumbled upon, there's like a little stand of odds and ends at this convenience store, like a Max or a 7-Eleven, let's say. And there was the Greatest Hits album. So I picked that up and played that in the car for days and weeks on end. And it just goes from there. I mean, any kind of allowance money I got, Jesse, or any kind of, if it was Christmas or a birthday, can you get me this, Bruce? Because I started searching up what he had, and I realized the catalog was extremely extensive. So, it went from there. Any kind of allowance money, I go down, just like a kid would do back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, go down to the store and get some music, get a vinyl or an album or whatever. And that was exactly me, but in 2008, 2009.
Colby, one of the things that you're making me smile about is I grew up on Top 40 radio, and toward the end of my high school, a bunch of my buddies were really into Kiss. And so, Kiss Destroyer, Kiss Live, I was listening to a lot of Kiss along with the Top 40 radio. And when I picked up, I was at a department store called, I'm drawing a blank, but anyway, it doesn't matter. That I was at a music store, and I picked up a Beach Boys 8-track, Endless Summer. And I put that CD in, and much like you, oh my goodness, the harmony and the beauty of the Beach Boys started filling my car. And it was something I'd not heard of, right? Like, and as you talk about, when you go from Ozzy to Bruce, and nothing against Ozzy or Slayer or any of these things, they're beautiful musicians, but it is like, wow, this is something different. This is something really different. Were there albums that took you a while to understand? And I'll give you an explanation. I'm going through all the Beach Boys albums. I am going through, I'm every record store I go to the B section, and I'm flipping through the albums. I'm going into the cassette section, or 8 tracks back then, looking for them. And I remember picking up Pet Sounds and playing it, and when like, well, I don't get this. What?
Right.
This isn't surf music. I don't know if I like this. Because I wasn't ready. So I didn't know if maybe like Nebraska or something else. Did you listen to and go, wow, this is different?
Well, I just want to say Pet Sounds is a master record, and I put that on some evenings with the lights off or with lights on, doesn't matter. And I just listen to that front to back, because the majesty and the mastery that Brian Wilson and the guys, especially Brian Wilson, though, without him, they don't have the Beach Boys. They don't have.
Exactly. And in fact, anytime on Twitter someone says, what is your go-to album, I always put Pet Sounds. And I know a lot of times people like, Jesse, you do a Bruce Springsteen podcast. I go, yes, but Pet Sounds. It's Pet Sounds. Yeah.
Right. Just like it's the White Album by the Beatles.
Yeah.
You don't say no.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So yeah.
So to answer your question though, let's see here. That's a great question. I love any kind of question that makes me ponder Springsteen and the band. Well, I would say, probably, well, it's got to be like, there's so many things with Springsteen's music, because he tends to change a lot, and I know
he does. People
might not notice that, but he does change a lot. He can be rock, and I think people especially refer to Darkness as like the fan favorite or the all-time great, is because it has more of a hard rock edge to it. Especially with Candy's Room, and especially with the lyrics of Darkness and Badlands and all these things, right? Street on Fire and all this. and Racing the Street. It's edgier, but it's hard to really pinpoint one particular album that, and I'm, of course, being a fan for 14 years now and going strong.
Yeah.
I've kind of become, let's say, what's the word? I'm used to it. I'm used to all the music. It's hard to remember exactly what I felt when I first put on Darkness, or when I first put on Work on a Dream, or, Human Touch. But with all the textures, I think I would probably say, I think probably Tunnel of Love, though.
Okay.
I don't think I quite got it at first.
Okay.
And then I realized, but then I realized years later that Tunnel of Love is probably one of the best of all time.
Yeah, and I've had people join me that have said you need to either have a little mileage in your life or had your heart broken a few times before you can truly understand Tunnel of Love. And it's funny too, because I've had people on the show that are like 19 or 20, and they'll immediately say, "Oh, Tunnel of Love is my favorite album."
Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm like, and I don't want to, like, wait a minute, you haven't had enough experience in your life to be.
Yeah, how dare you say that?
Yeah, and it's like, no, I love that. I love that it speaks to them that much.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
So, you've talked about you haven't had a chance to see him live yet. I'm sure you're itching for a tour like the rest of us. So what, talk about some of your other, like, share me some stories and thoughts about, your fandom and where this has been taking you.
Right. So as I kind of mentioned there, I began to scour the earth for other Bruce music.
Yeah.
Okay. I was about 15. This is 2009 now. I was 15 years old, and the midterms for my school were taking place. And I had, like, I think 20 or 30 bucks in my pocket to go down and get the Working on a Dream album, but also the London Calling live in Hyde Park concert, because those two things came around the same time, if I recall. And if not that, I think that was either 2009, 2010. Anyways, if it's a year apart, doesn't matter. The same time period. So I went down. I went down to HMV, and I got this new record, Working on a Dream, and went home and loved it. I mean, come on, Outlaw Pete. Queen of the Supermarket. You know what? I'm gonna get the hate for that probably online, because people are like, "Oh, how dare you like Queen of the Super?" I don't care. Queen of the Supermarket has some of the best harmonies and the best, instrumentation, and the crescendo that it reaches to is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that's we have to be careful as fans not to get involved with, snobbery, right? Like we were just joking about, like, how dare you at 19 love Tunnel of Love? I mean, no, I'm thrilled you love Tunnel of Love.
And I say that with love to those.
Yes,
who
I
love
know
it.
you do. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
It's like saying, I mean, I had a writer on right after Western Stars came out, and we had a wonderful discussion about how she couldn't enjoy Western Stars because it wasn't the album she wanted. This was during the President Trump administration. She wanted another Magic. She wanted an angry, this is what the world is going through, Bruce trying to make it better. And instead, we got a collection of brilliant short stories. And she said, I understand the beauty of the album. It isn't what I wanted. And so therefore I wasn't ready to enjoy it at that time. And I think that's, you mentioned something, Colby, that I love to bring up. Bruce, I think, for his own sanity and his own sense of creativity, doesn't want to repeat himself. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of writers, if we move to prose for a minute, that I pick up their latest novel, and I know what it's going to be. It is a familiar formula. It is like you slipping into a well-worn pair of jeans. It's comfortable, and you go. Yeah. And then there's other writers that you go, I don't know what I'm getting. And they keep stretching and doing different things. I think both are equally impressive and enjoyable. Bruce, I think, looks for ways to push his music and to push his creative side consistently.
Yes, he does. And I mean, like Western Stars, when that came out, it was the album I was expecting because, you know, when John Landau would talk about it in like a press release, or if whoever got a hold of it and got to do a little review or preview of it, I was like, okay, so they're saying it kind of reminds them of these older country artists from the 70s and 60s, like I might botch the name here, like Burt Buchanan and these guys.
Yeah, exactly.
And when I put it on, Jesse, I was like, this is the shit, man. Like Hitchhiker. Okay, I got two awesome stories. Okay,
sure, please.
So we're gonna take a ride in the Wayback Machine to 2011. Okay, now at this time, I have collected the Tracks album for Christmas of 2010. So I have that album. I have all 4 discs. My mom got it for me on eBay because the Tracks album is a unicorn. Okay, if you can find that, you are lucky, and God bless if you're still trying to. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because that Tracks album, man, there is a treasure trove of good fortune in there.
Yeah.
So with me growing up in the digital age, right? I had MSN, Messenger, Facebook was just coming out, stuff like that, right? So I did a lot of online dating, and there was a girl I actually met online. There was a few girls I met online, but with me being 14, 15, 16, I didn't know that I was a member of the LGBTQ plus community yet.
Yeah.
I still very much had crushes on girls and this and that. So but me and this one girl started talking, and she lived in Ontario, Fort Erie. So to put geography in perspective, she basically lives on the other side of Canada from me. Okay, it was like a Romeo and Juliet. So in 2011, though, after 2 years of chatting online, both of our mothers had a conversation, and the idea of maybe both of us meeting after I graduated high school. She was 2 years younger than I was. But going into summer vacation, I could take a trip and stay with them for about 3 or so weeks it was.
Yeah.
So I boarded the Greyhound bus back when we had routes running, because Greyhound has since canceled most of their routes in Canada. I took a trip. It took 2 days from Edmonton, Alberta, all the way to Toronto, Ontario. And I played Give the Girl a Kiss. From the Tracks.
Sure.
And you know, So Young and in Love, and all these songs, you know, because it just celebrated me being 18 years old and finally going forth with this girl that I just had the hots for. And you know, we chatted nights on end. I mean, I'm sure people can understand that nowadays because it's commonplace to online date and so forth, right?
Yes.
So I get there, and 3 days into my trip, she breaks it off with me.
Oh
no. Long story short, you know, when you fantasize about love, you have these ideas of what the other person is like.
Yeah.
especially when you can't see them all the time. There's long distance,
Yes.
we mail each other letters and gifts and things, but we couldn't hang out like a normal couple could do.
Sure.
So, I think we were both gobsmacked when we first saw each other at the station. But then once things settled in and she started seeing my quirks, because I'm a quirky guy, and I have a big laugh and a big personality and this and that. So it might have been sort of off-putting because she never saw that in person before. So,
Right.
it was a good visit though, and I ended up staying the whole 3 weeks. We remained friends. It wasn't a bad breakup. I did go for like a walk down the street when she was like, "Hey, I can't really do this anymore." But the trip wasn't canceled. We stayed. We saw Niagara Falls, and we went camping in the great northern part of Ontario. Beautiful, beautiful country and mountains and all these things. It was just so cool. It was a cinematic trip of a lifetime. It could have been a movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I gotta say, Ontario in the summertime is sweltering. It is like plus 40 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's
Okay.
hot.
Yes.
So there's that. And then another story would be, let's see here. Drawing blanks on what else I wanted to tell you.
That's okay. You know what I love? Yeah. Go ahead.
Story number 2, if I may, quick.
No, please.
My best friend, Stephanie, we grew up together in high school. That's where we met. And with her Mormon faith, she had a mission to go on in southern Alberta.
Yeah.
So like Calgary and south of that too, which is about 3 hours south of Edmonton, where her and I, grew up and all that together. So to give you perspective. Years later, though, during her mission, she met this man that she eventually began to love and marry. He was from Idaho, though, in the States.
Oh, okay.
So with that, and he was a firefighter. So, she thought, well, with your career being so, valuable and important and wanting to see other sites, they eventually moved to Idaho together. So in 2019, some years after, chatting with her online, I'm like, I would like to come see you and visit my best friend. So I did that.
Yeah.
And of course I got Bruce locked and loaded on my car. And Jesse, man, when I crossed the American border by car for the very first time, and I play Western Stars through the Montana plain, I almost cried, man, because it was such a beautiful, again, the emotional resonance of, holy crap, I am driving on the land that Bruce has been writing about for 40 plus 50 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wow.
Was this your first trip to the US?
It was not. I did fly. I have been to California twice and Florida once, again, for the Disneyland stuff and Disney World stuff, right? But I've always wanted to go to the States to just go. I don't want resorts. I don't want this and that. I want to see life. I want to see the streets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And being able to drive through the small towns from Alberta right down through Montana and then to Idaho, and seeing the desert country and these sunsets that just had this vastness across the land. Because it's a 10-hour drive.
Sure.
From my place to hers, So beautiful. And I had Bruce play the entire time because there's enough music to last 10 plus hours. So
that's nice.
Story.
No, that's great. You talked about you were a writer. Share me a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about your writing and what you have done in the past and what you're planning to do in the future.
Right. Okay. So as I was writing, I began writing really around the same time I discovered Bruce Springsteen. So going back to 2007, 2008, I was in drama class in grade 9. And in drama, we started learning about Shakespeare a little bit and plays and things like that. And I had a friend who showed me this thing he was writing. He called it a screenplay. And I was like, well, what's that? Well, it's a script for a movie. I'm like, wow, that sounds so interesting. And he showed me some of the material he was writing, how he wrote it, because screenplays are very different from, say, novels and poems and all these things, right?
Yeah.
So they're like a hybrid of sorts, but they're a very different animal. So my buddy and I, his name was Rick Heel, or Rick for short. We would sit in the atrium at school and begin writing science fiction stuff, and things like that. And really, it was drama class that kind of inspired me to write about characters and explore and create new worlds right from
Yeah.
my imagination. And I had a rich imagination growing up. So in my family, I have a single mom and I have three younger sisters.
Yeah.
And my the sister that's the oldest, her name is Soleil. It's sun in French.
Okay.
We would go outside and just play make believe and create stories and things like this, and just use our imaginations to the fullest, because sometimes we didn't have very much growing up, as a
Yeah.
lower middle class family, I would say, right? So basically this was the genesis of me becoming a writer in my teens and then in my 20s. So I was writing these screenplay type things until I was about 20 years old. And then I finished this big project. It was called Exile. And it's like a science fiction, but there's like a time paradox where the character goes back in time to like the ancient Roman times. And it was a really vast story with many, many characters. And it didn't really make sense
Okay.
when I read it back to myself. So I went from there to then, you know what, this thing, I need to write with more detail, and I want to have less constrictions, because screenplays have restraints to them. There's a certain way to go about writing them. You have to be concise. And with a novel, you don't have to be concise. You can be do whatever you want. So I turned to novels when I was about 2021, and short stories and things like this. And so go down to about 25 years old. So only about 3-4 years. I'll be 29 this year. So about 3-4 years ago, I had this idea for a collection of short stories. I had shelved my Exile screenplay, the science fiction screenplay that I wrote from 14 to 20. I shelved that because I was going to turn that into a novel, but I shelved it. And I went to this idea of short stories, and I wrote many, many short stories, honing my craft, getting better, trying this, submitting that, getting rejected, things like this. And to the point now where 3-4 years later, I have a very concise project. It has a very funky name. It's called Phantasmagoria. It's a dark story about mental health and about there's horror and there's some thrilling aspects to it, but it's a hybrid that I have not quite seen in literature to this day. And I'm proud of it. It's taken me a long time to figure it out, but I'm hoping I get a finished first draft this year. So
good.
There we go.
How has your Bruce Springsteen fandom and his work influenced your creative writing?
Yeah, so back when I was 14 to 20, for some reason, Jesse, I'd play Terry.
Okay.
The song Terry. And it just, again, the emotional resonance. I'm like, wow, it allowed me to excavate into my work. And again, like, and Devil's Arcade too, like that was a good song to really think creatively too. I mean, the whole album of Magic and so on. But I don't exactly write to music, but for some reason, the song Terry, I would just, again, replay on and on as I thought about scene structure, character development, story arcs, and things like this. To the point where, again, like I said, my mom would come down and say, honey, are you okay? Like, you have this sad song playing and you're 14, 15 years old. What's going on?
Yeah. Because as a parent, you never stop worrying.
Right. You
Yes.
know, and as a teenager, you're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, sure.
But you know, it wasn't until 17, 18, 19 where I started watching interviews of Bruce Springsteen and him talk about how he writes and how he records. And in many ways, Jesse, I have actually paired how he approaches an album to how I approach a project for
Oh,
literature
tell
writing.
me a little more about that.
Yeah, so I really love how he expresses the way he thinks about how to find a song title and whether a song title works and how an album title works, and how he would record 30, 40 songs but only
Yeah.
choose 10 and axe the rest. And I thought, okay, well, that's very challenging as someone who adores
Sure.
his children, right? How would I let go some of these elements if I were to cut here and amend here? It just, it really allowed me to understand how to sort of excavate into
Yeah.
not only my own work, but also as a listener to Bruce Springsteen's work.
Yeah.
And this is why, and I'll say this is why I really have no qualms, no issues with any of his albums, because people say, well, Lucky Town, Human Touch, Pony Boy, gross,
Yeah.
right?
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, Pony Boy doesn't offer very much for me as a listener. However, I have this rule when I approach a body of work for any artist, whether it's
Yeah.
music or painting or whatever. It's they offer this to us at this time period for this reason. There's a reason for Human Touch and Nebraska and Greetings from Asbury Park and and Working a Dream. That's another album that I think is underrated by a lot of people that I see
Yeah.
online talk about it. So without rambling too much more about it, I think that's just where it is. There's a concise project in each of these albums in the 20 albums that Bruce has released.
Yeah.
And I just sit there and I take it all in and I absorb it. And that's why I have no issues with anything that Bruce has ever done. I love Devils and Dust. I love the Cedar Sessions.
Yeah.
I can talk about any album of the catalog if you want.
Are there, obviously Magical is a special place in your heart. Are there other albums that while you love them all equal, that mean just a little more to you, perhaps?
Of course. So Darkness on the Edge of Town came out in June 2nd, 1978.
Yeah.
And I was born June 2nd of 93.
Okay.
So it kind of has like a birthday thing for me. So
Sure.
I'll play that on my birthday or something. I love to play Born to Run in the summertime because, as Springsteen puts it, it could all take place over one long summer night, right?
Sure.
I would say though probably and also Wrecking Ball. I like playing that because it really is a great summation of the times we live in and the hardship that as a young adult now, Jesse, I feel that having to afford the bills and work a full-time job and figure out how do I survive in this world, and seeing sort of the veil being lifted up for the first time, no longer a child where, everything is very imaginary and easygoing and peaceful, at least for the most part. And now it's like where I'm a Springsteen character. I am a Springsteen character in Nebraska.
Yeah, sure. I get it.
You know what I mean? Or Darkness or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But and like you mentioned too, Tunnel of Love resonates with me more, because I've dated a lot, after coming out in 2013. I experimented a lot, with boys, especially boys, but then there's some transgender people, and it just like the catalog of Bruce Springsteen, my world opened up for me sexual level and on an expressional level too.
Yeah.
But Western Stars, huge favorite, because again, it was an album I totally expected, and I just love every track. Working a Dream, I love because it's pop. It has kind of some orchestral elements like Western Stars too, but it's just different. And I love Last Carnival, the song Last Carnival that dedicates to Danny. And I mean, once you start knowing sort of the cause and effect for what he does, you appreciate so much more. But like I say, I don't really have any go-tos in terms of songs. What I'll do though, or what I did, in my youth especially, was if I couldn't go to a concert, I would follow on brucespringsteen.net. And at the time of like 2010 and all that, they would give like a brief synopsis of how the show went in any particular city, right? You know what I mean? And so I would actually mimic and create a set list on my iPod with the songs he played that night, and then let it play on my iPod in my room. And so I could kind of enjoy the sort of the flow, the ebb and flow of what he was trying to do on that show. It was a great time as a fan because that's all I had,
Yeah, that's great. So since you have not had the joy of seeing him live yet, this will be a tough question for you, but if you had 4 or 5 songs that you would want to hear, and and I'm going to give you, right, like, how you play bingo, there's the free square, obviously, Born to Run, Badlands, Thunder Road, whatever the things, but are there 4 or 5 songs that you would go in with your wish list and saying, yes, I got this?
Thankfully, because of YouTube, I've seen an extensive amount of him playing live. And I know, not being there, I don't feel the full extent of the power and the glory of the E Street Band.
Yes, absolutely, right.
But there is a high that you do get watching perform live.
Yes, absolutely.
There is a high when you see the front row just screaming and reaching out and him responding. There is a high when you see Max just hit the shit out of those drums on, the solo parts, with like My Love Will Not Let You Down, or the Born to Run, drum solo, or the Born in the USA drum solo. When the organ and the synths are like at their max peak, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? I would say definitely Born in the USA, hands down. It is meant to be played live with the full band, absolutely.
Sure. Okay.
I would say Racing in the Street, just because it's like a 7-minute plus masterpiece.
Right.
And watching and why I say that one, because I just happened to review the Racing the Street Paramount version, I think, the 2009 for the Darkness box set. Where they like the full 10 songs of the album of Darkness in like that little kind of closed off stage set. That was cool. I love the piano Roy does, and just you see the chemistry of the whole band. They don't have to say anything, they just kind of give a little glance or a nod, and they're just so in sync. But yeah, Born in the USA, Racing the Street. Let's see here. Oh gosh, there's so many. Pink Cadillac. Gotta love Pink Cadillac. Come on.
Sure. Absolutely.
Like, let's play that, right? Let's see here. There's many songs. My Love Will Not Let You Down, I think, is a fantastic song to play live. I've seen it many times on YouTube, like I said, but it's just rocking. It is just so good. And then my final one would be I don't want to give similar answers to other people, but I'd say probably hmm. And there's so many.
Yeah.
Jesse, you're putting me on the spot here. Darn
Yes.
it.
No, I understand. No, you're good.
Well, I would say probably. Let's see here. Radio Nowhere, because that's the one that just kicked things off for me.
That
as
was
a
the
fan.
first. That was your first love.
That was the
Yeah.
first. Yeah.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. On a side note, you mentioned a mutual love of Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
Have you picked up Brian's latest CD, At My Piano?
No, I have not. How is that?
It's pretty amazing.
Is it?
It's different, but it is just him playing select Beach Boys songs on the piano. There's no vocal.
Yeah.
There's just him on the piano.
Wow.
And you hear, You Still Believe in Me on a piano, or Wouldn't It Be Nice? It's just, it really is. It's very different. I've talked to a couple of people that are fans of Brian's music, and they also agreed. Like, it just, I'm a fan. I'm going to buy anything he makes because I love the man and I love his music, and he has been there. He was my first musical obsession. Bruce is my current one, but he was my first love. And check it out. Yeah, go on YouTube, check out a few things, and let me know what you think.
I will do that.
All right, before we get to the Mary question,
yeah.
Any final thoughts? I know you're trying to get back into your blog. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a funny one. So yeah, I also blog, and I really am not consistent with any of that, which sucks. I wish I was, but
yeah.
I just feel like, I live a very day-to-day routine filled life. I go to work, I come home. Yeah. I go to work, I come home.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I do want to be more reflective about myself, because I really found myself learning more about who I am in the past year or so.
Yeah.
Partly from my partner, and partly just from, again, that constant excavation through mind and body of thinking back to childhood, to young adulthood, to where I am now. At some point I would like to do more of that in a blog. I also like to do some news pieces or my thoughts on the world events, stuff like that, but I just haven't lately. And there's really no real reason for it, of me not doing it. I just haven't. Okay. But I do want to say that as some final thoughts, is as a newer age fan, let's say, I also got into the Pet Shop Boys in high school. Yeah. And in 2013, they had an album come out called Electric. And to my huge surprise, there was a cover of Last to Die on that record. And then, so that was cool. I'm like, okay, well, how did that happen? And I could not find anything about that. Like, I did not see how the Pet Shop Boys contacted Bruce, or if Bruce gave the go-ahead. I'm sure there was some kind of conversation there, but I don't know if there was. Okay. It wasn't until when Bruce did the From My Home to Yours. I don't know what volume it was, but I think it might have been Summertime. Yeah. That's what it was called, the one volume. I think he featured like 2 Pet Shop Boys songs on there, and he's like, I love the Pet Shop Boys. And I'm like, awesome. I love that, because as a fan of the Pet Shop Boys and as a fan of Bruce Springsteen, I just totally really resonated with the connection there that he made for me, because it's like, I love seeing that happen, where 2 artists you love actually have like a sort of a respect for each other. And that same thing goes for Lady Gaga, because I became a huge Lady Gaga fan, at the height of her peak there in about 2010, 2011. And lo and behold, on her Born This Way album, Clarence Clemens is on Edge of Glory. And I'm like, holy smokes. And even Rolling Stone reviewed the album as like a Springsteen-esque record. I thought, thank you. I love that because, again, there's a connection made with Bruce. And since then, now being 28 and having 14 years under my belt with Springsteen by my side and this and that, I've because of him, because of all the different things he's done himself, I've been able to explore other genres of music. I like electronic music. I like pop music, hard rock, some country. I've opened up my horizons because I was so linear and laser focused with just a select few artists. I was very picky, and I was very fickle with what I liked. And again, I think that was the cause of, listening to that hard rock and just, out with it. No, but then with Bruce Springsteen, he let me slow down and he let me see that there's more to music. And because of music, he's like the spine of my vast, expansive taste for music.
Okay, very nice. I remember when Clarence was in the hospital tragically, right before he died,
right.
Lady Gaga, sent out a tweet asking for her army of fans to send good thoughts and prayers.
Yes.
And thousands of videos. I mean, not exaggerating, thousands of videos from fans that just were sending love to the big man. Yeah. And you're like, you can say whatever you want about Lady Gaga. She's going to be okay to me. First off, I think she's very talented. I think she is. Yeah. She has a great soul, but with that much love and respect for Clarence, she's okay in my book, right?
Yeah, no. And knowing her dad was a huge Bruce fan, and then they met Bruce at a dinner or something like that. That was just so cool.
Yeah.
And I want to actually say this on your show, but when Clarence died, I was on my computer on Facebook.
Yeah.
And when I saw the news, I was heart-stricken, and I immediately played Jungle Land.
Yeah.
And I listened to the sax solo, because that sax solo is the greatest sax solo in rock history, period.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Anything else you want to ask?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you, is there anything I should have asked that I haven't?
That's pretty much, you pretty much got all the notes I wrote.
Okay, good, Colby. That's great.
Yeah, like I said, I've had a very lonely experience being a fan, because again, living in Canada, you see, it's not like living in New York or Jersey or places where Bruce is like, you have to go, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, whatever.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast is, and I've been blessed that, we've kind of connected, we've had people that got to share their experiences. So that means a great deal to me. If someone wants to reach you, how can they?
They can reach me by on Twitter. Let me pull up my handle, because I know I changed it. Let's see here. Twitter. It is Colby, COLBY _ Crossley, CROSSLEY. That's my Twitter handle. You can find me. You can follow me. I tweet things. I post things. I'm a pretty level-headed person. I hope I conveyed that on this podcast with you, Jesse.
Yeah.
I love Bruce Springsteen. There's one thing I do want to mention, going back to snobbery. I have joined, groups on Facebook and things like this on the internet when it comes to Springsteen, but I've just removed myself because the snobbery just totally undercuts, anyone's reasoning for liking this or liking that or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I respect everyone's opinion, but there's that. But yeah, Twitter, Colby Crossley, and then I have an Instagram where I also post a lot of vicarious things. My Instagram is Colby _ Cheeks _ Crossley, Crossley again. And then lastly, I do have a TikTok. And on my TikTok, you can see I have posted my entire collection of Bruce Springsteen on my TikTok. I did like a 3-minute video showcasing exactly what I have, from greetings all the way to the nugs.net
nice
stuff. Okay.
Very nice.
My TikTok here. Let me just open this up here. It is Colby _Crossley, just like the Twitter.
Okay, will do.
Okay.
All right. Before I let you go,
Yes.
if you are joining this podcast for the first time because you are a friend or family members of Colby, I end every podcast with the Mary question.
Yes.
The Mary question was given to me by Jay Armstrong. He is a retired honors English teacher, has a new book out. I always like to plug that, Bedtime Stories for the Living. And he would, in his honors English class, they would spend 2 days breaking apart Thunder Road. They would look at the lyrics. They would talk about the themes that Bruce is expressing. They would compare this to other poetry, like Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken.
I love that.
And at the end of the 2 days, he would ask the question, does Mary get in the car? Colby, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Of course she does. Because that's what the whole album's about. It's about getting the hell out of here. Come on, girl, let's get out of here. And then real life approaches in darkness. And their relationship carries on through the albums that come after.
Nice.
At least that's my impression.
No, one of my favorite answers is the guy says, absolutely, because Moonlight Motel is her death.
Yes.
That they had gotten in the car, they made it all the way to California, they had a wonderful life together, and now then he's mourning her death. And that's what Moonlight Motel is about.
Oh, I got goosebumps just hearing that, Jesse. Goosebumps right now. Chills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shivers. Yep.
Colby, this was great. I hope when you are ready to publish your writing, I hope you join me again so we can promote it. I look forward to reading it, and that sounds great. And you are welcome anytime. Thank you for spending time with me. Listeners, go get vaccinated, go get boosted. We are in troubling times. As we're recording this, the 1st of March, it is a scary time in the US, especially in Europe, in the Middle East, and a lot of places in the world. So let's try to be kind to each other, because that's the only way we're going to do this. Thank you, Colby. Thank you, listeners. And we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Thanks, Jesse.
This podcast would not be possible without my wonderful group of patrons. I want to send a special thanks to John Munson, Mary Thomas, Terry Smith, Dale Hosick, Andrew Goddard, Stephen Malio, Alex Samada, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, Holly Mack, and Captain America, aka Steve Rogers. Thank you guys for supporting the podcast. Your support means the world to me, and you are forever in my heart.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.